Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a couple of flavored Imperial dark beers. And I say dark beers because they are two different styles, though they are both closely related. We're going to be starting today with a brewer. This will be the first beer I've ever had from, so always exciting. This is Ravenna Brewing Company's Lion Tamer. It's an Imperial Porter that's been brewed with vanilla and bourbon barrel aged. Clocks in at 12.3% ABV. They're based in Seattle, Washington. For beer number two, we're jumping over yet again to Energy City Brewing Company. Another one of their Batisserie series. This is Neapolitan Stout. It's an Imperial Stout, milk stout. 10% on this one. They're based in Batavia, Illinois, and this one was brewed with cocoa, strawberry, Madagascar vanilla, and of course lactose. So two flavored, very closely related styles here. ABVs are a little bit apart. One's got barrel aging, one doesn't. But I think that they're both going to kind of go very much together just in what they're bringing to the table for these separate but related beer styles. So we're going to jump right in, starting with Ravenna Brewing Company's Lion Tamer. This is the Imperial Porter that clocks in at 12.3% ABV. Okay, so jumping into the first beer of today's Imperial Dark Beer review, we've got Ravenna Brewing Company's Lion Tamer. This is an Imperial Porter that's been brewed with vanilla and then bourbon barrel aged. It clocks in at 12.3% ABV and they are based in Seattle, Washington. So, first thing first, this is the first beer I've ever had from Ravenna. And as always, I'm really excited. I love trying new beers from new brewers. Just seeing what everybody's doing out there. It's always exciting. You will notice that this is a wax dip bottle. So I've got my kind of cap pull, assuming it's got a cap. It might also possibly have a cork. So I put this up here. It's hard to tell. Very dark. In terms of label art, it's got a silhouette of a woman riding a lion. I'm not sure how well or not well you could pick that up in the camera, but that's it. It's a very clean design, mostly plain. So I'm just going to take my trusty cap puller with this nice pointy edge and score underneath the edge of this cap through the wax. This is very thick wax on here, I can tell you that. It is quite thick, thicker than you normally run into, but it's actually getting a good gouge underneath. So I think it's going to mostly pull free here. All right, yeah, that did a pretty good job. So let's see if we can get up under here now, get this cap off. All right. Yeah, there we go. And no cork to have to pull. So just getting through that wax. And I can tell you immediately upon cracking that this beer is pungent in terms of its aroma. I'm smelling it through that tiny little top of this bottle, and it's huge. It is massive bourbon that I am picking up from about a foot and a half away here. It smells fantastic. So let's get this poured into the glass properly. All right, give a little agitation. Give it a chance to form a head there. All right, we will back off. Yeah, that looks quite nice. It's forming a nice head too. In terms of color, this is not quite pitch black, but it's very close. It is a porter, it's not a stout. The malt bill is typically going to be a little bit lighter. Most Imperial Porters I have seen are pitch black, but this is certainly in spec. It's very close. Very close to being absolutely pitch black. As you can see, it formed a very creamy head on top. And porters kind of are all over the board here. This one, as I'm holding it up, I do not see a ton of residual carbonation activity rushing up the sides of the glass. So I'm guessing there's a decent chance that this head is going to stick around. It's not having that constant rush of carbonation running up underneath and collapsing it from the underside. So talking about the aroma, when I first cracked it, we're going to get right up over the glass and see what we see. Oh, that smells fantastic. Yeah, that's got a very pronounced aroma. The bourbon comes through quite clearly. You can absolutely smell the vanilla on this as well. Now there is very much also clearly in here the classic porter underlying malt bill. So you can smell this roasty edge, and it's very much the underneath aroma. It's bourbon, vanilla, malt bill, kind of tiered in that order of intensity. That's what's coming through very, very clearly. And it smells fantastic. Though this roasty edge, I can tell you for the porter, smells very much like a classic porter recipe to me. There's roasty kind of chocolatey elements and roasty kind of coffee-like elements and this underlying kind of earthy roastiness to it. So it smells quite nice. Had to settle down a little bit there, so let's just jump right in and see what this is about. Oh, that's a big beer. Big and delicious. Wow. Yeah. Oh, that is just fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. Honestly, it's been a hot minute since I've had a porter that I thought was done this well. Okay. I'm an absolute porter lover heaven here. The balance of ingredients of this I would call perfection. There was nothing I would tweak. The type of bourbon barrel that they use and how long that they put it in there, as well as the type of vanilla they used, how much they put in there, and the malt bill that they used and the ratios they put in there. It's an absolute masterpiece of a porter. I mean, just an absolute masterpiece of a porter. This, I'm going to go ahead and say this on first sip. This is easily top 3 best porters I've ever had. No question about it. No question about it. This is absolute porter symphony, just deliciousness in a glass. And man, that's so good. I really wish you could taste this. Porters are one of my absolute favorite beer styles. Absolute favorite. And porters are not the easiest beer style to brew. They can sometimes get these funky off flavors. I've talked about this in many, many reviews. This one has the exact flavor profile that I want to taste in a porter. It's very deep, it's very complex, it's very roasty, but there's no funky, raisiny, or weird off flavors. All of this just tastes right, and the balance is just, it's perfection. So, I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel. Think on this flavor development a bit more. Let's see if I can pick any additional information out for you. Body on this one is kind of on the border between medium and medium heavy. It's got breadth to it, but it's not maybe quite as robust as you would anticipate for this ABV range. The mouthfeel is similar to most porters. It's not quite as active in terms of carbonation as it's sitting on the palate. And it's got quite a good bit of viscosity to it. Quite a bit more than your average porter. Indeed, quite a bit more than your average Imperial porter. So the body's maybe not quite as large as I anticipated, but the mouth feels far more impressive than I anticipated, and that does help to balance it out. It gives just this extra texture to it as it's in the palate. Now, as you agitate across the palate, this one doesn't get super crazy creamy, doesn't get super silky, and it doesn't really get foamy, but it does get a little bit thicker, and it absolutely does a tremendous job of coating the flavors all around the mouth. I mean, just all around them. These are big, bold, pungent flavors, and they're absolutely incredible. So I would encourage anybody that drinks this, do yourself the favor, just swish it around, let it get all around the palate so you can really experience every bit of this beer. It's absolutely delicious. In terms of the balance, absolutely, I think they nailed it. There's nothing I would change about this. That bourbon comes in strong, that vanilla's right behind it, that malt bill just kind of blooms out of there, and then they're almost holding almost in even thirds. Just bourbon, vanilla, and malt. Almost completely even in their distribution of the way the flavor presents itself. Now, the order in which they come in is indeed bourbon, vanilla, malt, but once they all come in, oh, it's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. This is one of the best balanced beers I've had in, a very, very long time. I literally, there's nothing I would tweak on this. I think it is balance perfection. Absolutely perfect. Nothing I would tweak. The finish on this, way longer than your average porter. And surprisingly, it's not just that bourbon that's extending the length. It's really the pungency of all of these flavors in it. And it's equal parts all the way to the end. It just slowly dies, and it's in equal parts. So you're getting bourbon, vanilla, and malt all the way to the end. And I gotta say, I gotta come back and say this. The intensity and roasty edge and blend of malts they put in this is some of the best I've ever had in a porter. It is just so bold and so pungent, and it pairs just perfectly with the flavor that barrel imparted onto this beer and the vanilla. I mean, this is just a masterpiece of a porter. It absolutely is. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up my scores. When we come back, we will get to the second beer of today's Imperial Dark Beer review. That's Energy City Brewing's Batisserie Neapolitan Stout. This is the Imperial Milk Stout of the bunch, and that one clocks in at 10% ABV. Okay, now jumping into the second beer of today's review. This is Energy City Brewing's Batisserie Neapolitan Stout. It is an Imperial Milk Stout, 10% ABV. They are based in Batavia, Illinois. That's how I'm going to pronounce it until somebody tells me otherwise. This one brewed with cocoa, strawberry, Madagascar, vanilla, and lactose. So it's got the three main Neapolitan flavors represented in Imperial Stout form and Milk Stout with a lactose. So one thing I've noticed, milk stouts, sometimes they're super sweet, sometimes they're not. And one thing I've discovered as I've drunk many of them is the ones that have more fruity accents, a little more lactose is called for if you really want to impart the essence of fruit. So in this one, being vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, the strawberry in particular is going to take a little more lactose because strawberry is also an ingredient that's very easy to lose in beer. It is a delicate fruit. And I've had a few different Neapolitan beers, and I've thought all of them have been great. So we're going to see how this one is. In terms of label art, it's pink and black and white. So chocolate, strawberry, vanilla, the color scheme, very clean design, just like the last Batisserie series that we reviewed. So let's get this cracked. Gently. All right, and poured right in the glass. Now, I am just using my porter glass that I used for the first one. Stouts and porters very related, so no problem there. I do have a dedicated specific to stout glass, which I also like, but this is just fine. All right, that is forming a really nice head there. Visually, just like the last Batisserie Imperial Stout I've had from Energy City, it's not pitch black, but it is very dark. And if anything, this is actually even a little lighter than the porter was. So yeah, maybe it's a little surprising, but that's kind of what I expected just based on the last Energy City Batisserie Imperial Stout that I had. So sure, they have some deep, richly roasted malts in there, but they're also using a good proportion of some lighter of the dark end of the roast malts in there. It's just part of their malt bill. And sure, it's not exactly what you expect for a 10% on an Imperial Stout, but it's certainly in range. Make no mistake about that. In terms of head and retention, yeah, this one's got a bit more active carbonation, so I expect that head's going to settle down and maybe collapse before I'm done with this, but it looks pretty good. It formed pretty nicely. Let's give it a sniff. Oh, yeah. Okay, so getting right up over this, I can clearly smell, and indeed the most prominent aroma on this is the strawberry, which is kind of surprising to me, but I can smell the strawberry, the chocolate, and the vanilla, as well as the underlying roasty malt bill. So it smells exactly as advertised. It smells like a Neapolitan milk stout. It's got a nice roasty malt bill. It's got a little sweetness, strawberry, chocolate, vanilla. So let's just jump in and see how their version of a Neapolitan milk stout is. Without further ado, jumping in. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow, yeah. Oh, that's really good. That's really good. Very well done. Okay. My initial thought as I was agitating around the palate was, wow, that strawberry is really coming to life as I'm just agitating. I haven't even swallowed to let the flavor settle yet. And as soon as I did, Strawberry, just as it was the dominant aroma, is the dominant flavor. And yes, this is on the sweeter side, but I stand by this. If you're going to use fruit, especially something like a strawberry, you're going to need to use more lactose than your average milk stout in order for that flavor to come through. It's not going to taste like strawberry without it, because it's easy to get lost in beer, and you need that underlying sweetness to bring out that natural flavor of the berry. Not only that, but the balance of this one is incredible. They did layer it. It's strawberry, then chocolate, then vanilla. It's strawberries dominant, chocolate's just below it, vanilla's just below that. The chocolate and vanilla are very, very close. The strawberry, intensity-wise, feels about a good 25-ish% more intense than the other two flavors. And it's actually needed, because once it tiers, the way these other flavors develop, especially mixing with a nice roasty backed malt bill, is the strawberry could easily get lost. I've seen it in many, many beers. They made the smart play here. They probably used more strawberry, and they definitely used enough lactose to let it come out. But the end result is the balance is spot on to be able to taste like Neapolitan. They absolutely nailed it here. This one is truly delicious. It is exactly as advertised, a Neapolitan Imperial Milk Stout. It's just delicious. In terms of body and mouthfeel, I got a decent sense on that first sip, but I was so concentrating on the flavors, I'm going to jump in for just one more, make sure I get it right, and explore this finish. Body on this one is on the border between medium and medium heavy. It's got a nice robust body to it. For 10%, it feels more or less where I expect for the weight. The mouthfeel, it does have a good bit of resistance. There was a little bit of effervescence as it sits flat in the palate. Once you start to agitate it, it does thicken up. It gets a little creamier, not silky, not velvety, not foamy, but a little bit thicker, a little bit creamier. So overall, the body and the mouthfeel work very well together and are right in a line to where I'd expect for this ABV. In terms of the length of the finish, this one is above average to be certain, and it really comes down to the pungency of the flavors that they have in here, the strawberry, the chocolate, and the vanilla. And it pushes out quite a bit longer than I anticipated for this beer style, and especially given the flavors. And it's not hoppy. There's no sense of bitters at all in here. I'm sure they used hops. I'm sure there are some, but it's subtle. It's a sweeter beer, and it's letting the additive flavors be the star of the show. That's the smart play if you're going to make a beer that you want to make a Neapolitan flavored anything. Just let the flavors do their thing. And where it ends is exactly where it began. It ends with strawberry on top, chocolate below that, vanilla below that, but they're all just still balanced in harmony. That's the ratio that I would like of flavor intensity. And look, we're not talking at 75% strawberry, 20% chocolate, and 5% vanilla or anything. It's all pretty close, but the strawberry is a little bit more prominent. I'd say roughly a quarter intensity prominent. The dial's just turned up just a little bit more. The chocolate's below that, and the vanilla's just below that. But frankly, vanilla and chocolate are very easy flavors to pick out in a dark beer. Strawberry, not as much. So I come back to this, and I thought it from the very first sip. The balance on this is brilliant. They absolutely did right by making Neapolitan, and the balance and the ratios of the ingredients they absolutely nailed. Thinking on the finish still, I can still taste lingering strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla. It is quite long. As I'm sitting here, it's just vestiges, but they're still lingering on the back of the palate, and it's really, really refreshing. It's very nice. This is a fantastic beer. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both beers, we're going to get them ranked, starting with Ravenna Brewing's Lion Tamer. This is an Imperial Porter that had added vanilla, was bourbon barrel aged, clocks in at 12.3% ABV. They are based in Seattle, Washington. First thing out of the gate, the aroma on this was one of those that was absolutely huge. You could smell it from several feet away. Very clearly bourbon, very clearly vanilla, very clearly the malt bill. It was nice and roasty. It smelled amazing. gets a 10 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely loved it. Honestly, this is easily one of the best porters I've ever had. The balance of flavors was perfect in this. The bourbon came through just as big in the flavor as it did in the aroma. Same thing for the vanilla, and the malt bill really blew me away. It was so roasty and just the perfect balance of malts. I absolutely loved it. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the body on this one was maybe not quite as big as I anticipated. It wasn't a lackluster breadth to the body, but a 12.3 for an Imperial. I did expect it to be a bit bigger than it was. That being said, it was above average. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this was tremendous. It felt like a classic porter, only it wasn't quite as effervescent on the palate, but it felt exactly right for the ABV range. It had a lot of resistance, a lot of viscosity that helped to counterbalance that little bit less broad body to it. Mouthfeel was great. Gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish on this one was really long, and it was really equal parts all of the flavors. Normally in a big high ABV beer, you expect there to be a nice finish, especially barrel aged, and that really pushing it out. But it kept that same equilibrium of barrel, vanilla, and malt bill all the way through to the end of a very long finish. Gets a 10 out of 10. Head and retention, this one poured among the best I've ever poured at home. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this was very close to pitch black, but it wasn't exactly pitch black. Now, porters aren't typically quite as dark as their stout counterparts, but in an Imperial, just due to the volume of the malts added, you do expect it to be pitch black. This was close, but not quite there. I docked 1 point, it gets a 9 out of 10. For the balance, I talked about this in terms of flavor and what happened on the end of the finish, but the balance in this beer, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I thought it was perfection. It gets a 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. You can probably guess this. I said this is easily one of the best porters I ever had, and I stand by it. I gave it a 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style. Yet again, this is just another category that I thought it well deserved the perfect mark. It does get a 10 out of 10. It really was easily top 3 best porters I've ever had. I loved every bit of this beer. I really wouldn't have changed a thing. Which brings the total score on Ravenna Brewing Company's Lion Tamer to a 96 out of 100. This is absolutely top tier status beer. If you're a fan of porters, or if you're a fan of Imperials, the bigger ABVs, and in particular the barrel aging, this is one to seek. It is absolutely one to seek. Easily top 3 best porters I ever had. I wish I had ordered some more of these, and I'm going to keep my eyes out for more beers by this brewer, that's certain. Moving on to beer number 2. This is the stout of the bunch, Energy City Brewing Company's Batisserie Series Neapolitan Stout, Imperial Milk Stout, 10% ABV out of Batavia, Illinois. Cocoa, strawberries, Madagascar, vanilla, and lactose. So all of the main ingredients needed for Neapolitan. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this one was very big. You could smell it from a pretty good distance away, and it did smell quite clearly Neapolitan. No question about it. That sweetness, the chocolate, the vanilla, the strawberry all came through. I was really impressed with the strawberry kind of leading the march in the aroma, which I didn't anticipate, and it was lovely. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the taste, I think they nailed exactly what they set out to do here. This was milk stout, Neapolitan flavored, and they nailed it in beer form. And again, same thing I mentioned on the aroma, the strawberry really was the leading flavor, which I think is a really smart idea because it's a flavor that's easy to get lost, especially with big, bold flavors that bind so naturally to malt bills, such as chocolate and vanilla. But I absolutely loved it. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the body, similar to the first one, yeah, a little lower ABV here, and the body was not exactly as large as I expected it, but it was certainly well above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, very close to perfection for me. If it had had just a little bit more viscosity to it, it probably would have felt right. Not to say that it wasn't. It did have a good bit of resistance, but in a big Imperial milk stout, I did expect just a little more than came through. I only docked 1 point though. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the finish on this one was quite long. Milk stouts, you never really know what you're going to get. The flavors are bold and they're pungent, but they don't necessarily translate into a long length on the back end for the finish. This one did. It was well above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did a very good job for port at home. It wasn't quite as amazing as the first beer, but it was well above most beers you would get at home of this style poured. 8 out of 10. For the appearance, similar to the first beer, I expected pitch black and I didn't get it. If anything, I thought this was actually even a little bit lighter, but 10% ABV, so there's not quite as many malts in it, but it came close. Only docked 1 point here. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the balance, you might have guessed just based on my descriptions of the taste and the bulk of what comes through and whether or not I find the taste balanced is the overall balance of the beer. And the balance of this was fantastic. I could still get the classic underlying roasty malt bill, though there was a nice dose of lactose added in there, which really in particular helped that strawberry speak, as did the chocolate, as did the vanilla. And making a Neapolitan flavored beer, that's really what you need to do. Do what you need to do to let the flavors come through. I think they nailed it. It gets a 10 out of 10. Filling in the intangible, I've had really great luck with all the Neapolitan flavored Imperial milk stouts I've had. This was just another fantastic one. Mission accomplished. 10 out of 10 for me. Finally, as an example of the style, there's a lot of really interesting and unique Imperial milk stouts out there. This one overall I thought was very, very well done. It only lost a handful of points in a few categories across the board, and I think overall it was a very, very strong, very well made beer, and I really do think that they captured the essence of Neapolitan in this beer. Frankly, even though it lost a fair bit of points, not that many, but across a fair bit of categories, I only docked 1 point here. It does get a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Energy City Brewing's Batisserie Neapolitan Stout to a 90 out of 100. So we're looking at two very high scoring beers here, only 6 points apart. Sure, there are different styles. One's an Imperial Porter, one's an Imperial Milk Stout, but they're both flavored, had a little bit of different kind of take on this dark beer Imperial side, but they both, I thought, were absolutely incredible and very, very well done versions of the individual beers that they were making. Something here a little different for everybody, barrel-aged on the porter side and a sweeter end on the stout side, but they were both equally delicious. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.